just had to restart Discord. I don't... Discord, why?
Discord is the best. Although Skype is better, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows that.
Skype overlords.
Sure. I see squat toilets.
Because... Squat toilet. Oh, yeah. I put a bunch of fluff things in here, so we can do a few fluffs. I was in China for a school trip a while ago. This was like the analog of a first year in high school for your education system. And so we were in China and they have squat toilets. And I gotta tell you, right off the bat, and I doubt that my opinion will change ever on this, but if there is a good argument against it, I love squat toilets. They are so much more hygienic. That's how people used to poo and pee, back in the day. And it's so arbitrary, the toilets we have now, and like you can go to Germany, it's like, but it's more hygienic, but that's such a high cost thing to do. In Germany, they have like regular sit-down toilets, but they will clean themselves. Have you seen those?
What are you talking about, the robo toilets, or?
I'm talking about it was a weird toilet I saw in, I think, the airport, where basically it's a regular sit-down toilet with the lid and whatever, and once you get off, it starts rotating the platform that you sit on and cleans it. Yeah. And it's just like, squat toilets are so simple, so cost-effective, and just love squat toilets, man. That's why I put that in there. The world needs to know squat toilets.
I'm divided on the subject. I think there should be a democratic vote on this, and if it's 52-48, then there should be a second vote. We didn't do politics, right? This podcast.
So subtle.
Very.
I do not want any contact. That reminds me of another pet peeve I have, is you'll go into these bathrooms and everything will be hands-free, so it's so hygienic.
And then there's the door handle.
The doorknob? Yeah. What? But literally everybody, even the people who don't wash their hands, they use that. And it's like, this whole bathroom was designed so poorly if you have this door with the door handle.
I went to a McDonald's not too long ago, and they fixed this problem because they had a door handle on one side of the door and just a plate that you can push your elbows against. The only thing was the plate was on the outside and the door handle was on the inside. So, exactly the wrong way around.
What you gotta do is do some ninja moves. Kick up, use your foot to open. Have you heard the story with Bellman? It's not very well sourced, and what I'm going to tell is an embellished version of it. Yeah.
Sure.
It's not even how I interpret it. It's just how I want it to be.
Sure, those are different statements. So go ahead.
You've done dynamic programming and things like that. It's like an algorithm writing paradigm, which was developed by Bellman. And so Bellman was working at some institution, I think, funded by the Department of Defense back in the 50s. And so, he was a mathematician, and apparently the Secretary of Defense back then was not a big fan of any research. So the most basic of research, mathematics, was, questionable. And so what he said that he would work on was dynamic programming. And it's like, what the hell is dynamic programming? Well, he made it sound cool and useful enough so that it could get funded, but also vague enough so that he could work on anything that he wanted to. And I just thought, that's ingenious. It's just like a great political move, and it just tells you how much mileage you can get out of properly naming things. Because if you know what dynamic programming is, it's like, it has nothing to do with the name. It's just completely disconnected. But that's where the name comes from, in this semi-embellished version of the story.
I like this dynamic of scientists kind of gaming the system and making stuff sound cooler than it is. I've kind of been part of that, sort of. A couple of years ago, I was I was finishing up my master's, and I was kind of one of the people they were thinking about giving a PhD position for. My master's is in power converters for electric vehicles, and this PhD position was for further developing this whole concept of smart grids and using your car battery to give back to the grid when necessary, when there's a peak demand and that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is that grant, which is given out by an organization called Agentschap NL, distributors of research subsidies, I guess, in the Netherlands. The university kind of gets dibs on a lot of these research things, but they still have to write proposals. So they have to write a proposal and say, we want to do this and this research, and we want this much money. And essentially, it's always roughly the same amount of money. It's like 100,000 euros or something to be able to pay a PhD for 2 years, and then after that, they apply for a second grant to the other 2 years. So the funny thing is, I declined in the end because the workload was just rising and rising on that project. I found out later the exact same grant with the same application went to wireless charging of electric vehicles. And I thought, how the hell did they get this research grant to mean something, in my eyes, completely different? So the actual application, when I looked at it, I never actually saw it. All they really said in the research grant was something along the lines of, we'd like to research EV charging standards. And that's it, basically. So they could make anything out of it, literally anything out of it, as long as it had to do with charging and electric vehicles, which was like that particular chair almost exclusively did stuff with electric vehicles. And they applied for that grant 2 times more in the period since then, with the almost exact same headline of, EV charging standards.
I don't know that's so much gaming the system, because I don't know so much about the review process of all of these applications. Hopefully they get qualified people, but when you don't really know or understand what the scientists are working on, you are always sort of taking a shot in the dark when it comes to giving out these grants.
Yeah, that's it, right? Because a lot of these grants, especially academic grants, are essentially no failure state grants. So they go to a PhD position or a postdoc position or even master's position. And those are just people that are doing work, and even if the work doesn't really pan out, they can still publish. There's still a scientific result, so to say. So I guess from what I heard, that research grant distributor company thing, they do have scientists and industry experts that they consult. But for a large part, it's still just kind of rubber stamping. And also there is a very big factor of, if you just put effort into your application, if you actually ask a postdoc to spend a month on the application process, application just looks so much better than the competition that you're going to get it anyway, even if it's about investigating the toxic effects of dihydrogen monoxide or something, Bullshit.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed with, I guess the only time I really noticed is I've mentioned that my dad is an astronomer, and projects in that field, sending things into space, very expensive things. The applications can be just, or the application process is just such a monster, and you may not get it, and like you'll see these applications which are, a few hundred pages long, and then they'll just write back after a long review process that, well, you didn't get it, and then maybe you wait another 6-7 years and apply again. But there's just so much work.
There's this feeling often in academia that it's fairly easy to get into academia and to do stuff. It's actually very comfortable for most people. You don't have to do a real job. You can just fuck around all day. But most people in academia are kind of, they want to do stuff, they want to improve the world in some way, and they want to do
Mm-hmm.
the cool stuff. And if you want to get into the cool research, and especially things that are just fundamentally limited, like Hubble Space Telescope time, or doing experiments at CERN, or launching a satellite, you have to go through these review processes, which are
Mm.
much more grueling than peer review, for instance, for a journal. Like peer review in a journal, it just goes to like 5 experts in the field. And often, if your research is of any value at all, and if it's well executed, you will get published somewhere. Maybe not in Nature, but you will get published somewhere. Between some processes which are fairly inconsequential and some processes which are very consequential. I guess that's a good thing. I guess this is actually how the world should work. Yeah.
Well, it's all about, the resource intensiveness of,
Yeah, and
publishing something in a journal versus.
often that's not even it, right? So, supercomputer time. If you apply for no time, so you say, well, I want to have 2,000 node hours. These are limited resources, obviously, and they are
Yeah.
very highly contested sometimes on some supercomputers like Deltares. Sometimes you have to wait for weeks. There are these very simple solutions for it because a lot of programs that people write are just super unoptimized and can run much faster. Or
Mm-hmm.
it's actually pretty cheap to just build more computers. Like, it's no real big deal. There's no use in letting people who are paid $80 an hour wait for a couple of weeks before they get the results back. It's like cheaper to just build a couple of computers and do it in the meantime. So sometimes it's kind of perverse, but in general, I would agree that like it's a good thing that in most of serious science, if there is this contentious application process, it is fair in a sense. You do
Oh, yeah.
actually have to battle for good resources. Like politics.
Well,
We shouldn't talk
sometimes,
about politics,
well, sometimes, often with these things, I saw in the NASA applications, there are like 4 or 5 projects that are very hammered out and would all, be great projects, but there's just not enough money to throw around, so
Yeah.
you have to choose one, and that process can be very hard to deal with because sometimes it comes down to arbitrary measures, which would look cooler.
Yeah,
Or
which would look cooler, which is better for scientific dissemination. There is a little bit of a renaissance with the whole Kepler thing, finding thousands of exoplanets, and New Horizons flyby has been a big thing, and now Juno has been on Fox News, which I think is a first for any science news on Fox.
what? Oh, I did see a tweet, which I don't know if I mentioned this last podcast. I don't think I did, which just annoyed me so much. It was by some lady in some Fox News team, and she was like, we're just getting these pictures. She was just enraged that we're just getting these pictures of Pluto now when the spacecraft was there. Yeah, you see what it's just like.
Oh, that is.
And I was like, oh,
that is frustrating.
In misunderstanding. Yeah, it's like this government funded. It's like what? Which I was going to add to the notes something to talk about discourse on the internet, but then the Vlogbrothers last 2 videos sniped most of my points.
Yeah.
And I was just like...
But that doesn't mean that everybody who listens to our podcast has watched the Vlogbrothers. We have totally exclusive subscriber bases. Don't you know that? If you do an XOR on it, it's perfect.
But the basic points being... Well, I guess I'll do almost a response to the Vlogbrothers, even though it's most of the same points that I had. That, how do you sort of implement these ideas? Because it's, I guess, in a sense, these ideas of checking your ego at the door and actually, having common discourse. Because even the positive comments seem to sort of wow, this will be so confusing to anybody who hasn't watched their last two videos.
Can you just
the positively based
run it down for a second? Just
basic idea was, they were talking about all this polarization and pretty much any internet fights and how people get divided, partitioned into certain camps, and actually that, arguing against those camps and those ideas in the way that people are, which is
tribal,
to say the least. Yeah. That was a perfect word to describe it.
Right.
It strengthens the other side because, in the way they put it, whose mind was changed by being called an idiot.
Yeah.
And it just creates these sort of cycles of what I like to call circle jerks or clusterfucks, whatever you like to call, of these groups who talk only within themselves about, their point of view and never discuss with the other side. And you find that I could talk about this for way too long.
There are just these two camps that like to attack each other and not really listen to each other. And I've been involved. There's this subreddit called Our Energy, and it's supposed to be a discussion about energy policy and news in large grid scale stuff, energy stuff. And then there is this very small group of people that say, we need all the solutions to rid ourselves of carbon and fossil fuels. And they just got snowed under. There's never really a discussion about how are we going to implement this thing about like the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Accord and that kind of stuff. That's never discussed. They're just talking about, there's a new breakthrough in solar technology that makes it 100% efficient and doesn't cost anything. Okay. Sure. We have this, like, the sea is kind of at my doorstep. Can we like fix it now instead of like talking about stuff in 20 years in the future? Maybe. But yeah, that's so frustrating.
So I guess the question that we could discuss is how to sort of control for this, because you find that, you just end up talking with people who you agree with, which is completely unproductive. So just sort of avoid that if you find yourself having lots of conversations where you just agree with everyone.
It's hard,
in a sense,
though,
in a
right?
rut, because you're not going to go anywhere with that. You're just going to stay where you are and perhaps get more and more polarized in whatever you guys talk about.
I try to do this. I try to go to like people who think the most opposite way to me that I can find. For instance, I've been trying to mix myself in discussions on conservative issues. I am much more progressive myself. I've been frequenting Sargon of Akkad's subreddit, which is don't go there. Geez, I've been trying to do this, but often I am not convinced of the other side, and that's kind of troubling because that means that I am still very much in my own bubble. I cannot even often find a redeeming point on the other side. It's often...
Well, there's also a problem that when you go to a place that's, sort of in their circle jerk state, their arguments get worse and worse. Like, I find all the time with people who agree with me, I will be like, I agree with you, but all of your arguments are terrible. Like, they make no sense. And so when you go into another camp that's just sort of the mirror image, just, they act the exact same way, except with a different fundamental views, it's hard. So you have to find other people who are also looking for people with different views, who have slightly different views. That's very difficult to do.
I do find when you then go back to your own clique, so to say, to people with your exact views, often their arguments are terrible as well, but you just gloss over them because you agree with the premise or you agree with the conclusion.
I mostly disengage.
But I don't want to. I do believe in free exchange of ideas and that kind of stuff. I just know that humans are awful. I just want robots. That's the ultimate conclusion of this entire podcast.
Well, one thing I found is I'm staying in a place where I guess the host family is... The guy's an economist.
Ooh.
Who's interesting to talk to, and he's very conservative. And it's a little annoying sometimes because I notice when he's talking, he just like sort of inserts the conservative ideals in.
So is
like,
he
with whatever you're talking about?
Is he a Reaganomics guy or
not? I actually do not know. I don't. Oh, you mean like trickle down?
Yeah,
economics?
trickle down
I don't think
economics.
So. No, I don't. He's an interesting dude. He was like a computer science major, physics major, and then a financial economics major. And he was very fun to talk to. And I'm also more liberal leaning, but it's not like he's just repeating all these nonsensical arguments to fill his view. He actually has arguments, and when there are times that the arguments are weak, he doesn't support them. For example, in the primaries, he voted for Clinton, even though he's very conservative, just because it's hard to make sense of all the people who think Trump is an idea. I was going to ask him about that, but he didn't support Trump.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. How disappointing.
I also often think that it's very easy to listen to somebody and listen to some of their ideas. And then, for instance, I'm not saying you've done this, but listen to a couple of this guy's ideas and just say, oh, he's a conservative. And then attribute other properties to the person that they might or might not actually support. Because then...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you get kind of guilt by association, even though I don't necessarily agree with these simplified terms like progressive and conservative, in the sense that it's a good starting point to classify people and to put a conversation into a context, but at some point you just have to let go and start discussing the point and not cultural subdivision of people or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I find myself actually liking some of the conservative ideas because when you look at sort of the representatives for all of these camps, you see the fringe and the most extreme of them. Like, I saw this little video where they're like, oh, we got a liberal and a conservative to sit down for a date. And then this guy's like, well, he talks a little about his tax policy and then a tiny bit. And then the liberal lady is like, so, do you hate immigrants? And it's like, what is that? That's not a conversation. That's sort of like an attack.
Yeah.
And it's just those sort of assumptions. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Oh man, that is cringy. That is horrible.
Yeah.
Man.
Ooh, I should send it to you. It's a short video and it was so cringy.
Put it in the show notes.
All of the video was pretty cringy. Yeah.
I hate that kind of stuff. It's so counterproductive. I guess that ties in very well to how people talk on the internet, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I find myself having good conversations with them, so you sort of just have to find these people. We talked a bunch about philosophy, which I make fun of all the time. And I think it's very warranted to make fun of philosophy and philosophers.
Of course.
And I was actually disappointed at the end of that conversation because we agreed pretty immediately on almost all of the things. And that's sort of like a rut conversation. You should never change your view because somebody agrees with you, but if you notice you're agreeing all the time, it's kind of disappointing because you're not seeing new views.
It is. Although it's good to also enrich your views. A lot of people have gut feelings about what they do and don't support, and they have these preconceived notions because there's culturally there's this thing, people very quickly agree with stuff that is in the mainstream, stuff that's familiar, that they know.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily think about it, or they have thought about it, but they were ill-informed, misinformed, I don't know. And you get these cultural tendencies that can be damaging in the long run, even if you, I don't know, what would be a good... I'm kind of still thinking about the energy discussion. So if like everybody knows that that it's a good thing to combat climate change, but for instance, what if the common knowledge is that we have to club baby seals to do that because some scientific paper concluded 40 years ago that that's the best way to combat climate change. But now there's actually new evidence that says that's not the case, but there's still this ingrained cultural thing that people have learned for generations. Maybe I guess that's the Pluto discussion, right? The Pluto planet discussion. Yeah. People learn it as a planet, and they don't want it not to be a planet, but it's obviously.
I don't know if that applies so much because that's a discussion about definitions, which when people are debating definitions, I am fine with that debate being completely, arbitrary, because it is arbitrary. They're definitions. Calm down, guys. That reminds me of another point, as things progress and you get more new evidence, you should be prepared, or not so much prepared, but do not shame people when they change their mind, and be able to change your mind.
The flip-flop thing, right?
Yeah, and people give these politicians so much crap for changing their mind. It's but if they are given new evidence to say that their old opinion was bad, is that not a good thing? It's
totally.
It's disappointing.
But then there's Trump, right? So there's a sliding scale of changing your mind. God, I can't talk. If you change your mind 4 times on one day, I think that kind of warrants suspicion at some point.
It's a little disingenuous. just a little bit.